Professor Zodiac sighed and looked around at the walls wistfully. Well, originally my name was Silverstripe, and I was a professor of engineering and arcane science here at Hoofington University. Suddenly, the professor's image dissolved, and the air overhead filled with dancing lights that coalesced into a moving image of a lecture hall. The view seemed to be from a camera set in the corner of the room. A white unicorn mare with a gray zebra-like stripe on her leg and mane was writing on one of the boards at the front with a piece of chalk. She finished writing a line of weird mathy stuff, put the chalk down, and sighed. There. Well, I hope you found my lessons useful. The university will see to getting you an acceptable instructor for this class by next week, she said, turning to a lecture hall that was virtually empty but for a dozen students. They didn't seem to be paying much attention either, and most of them shuffled out immediately. A few gave her commissive farewells, though, and one even offered a comforting hug. The professor maintained her composure as she said her goodbyes and put her notes in a saddlebag, but slumped after the last student had exited. So sorry you lost your tenure, Professor Silverstripe, a rasping voice said. A cough followed the words as the voice's owner walked down from the back of the lecture hall. I pointed him out, and my friends murmured softly as the scarred buck approached the mare in the picture. I suppose that the Board of Regents felt a half-blood to be a complication in the present climate, Goldenblood said in his raspy, rusty nails voice. He looked like hell, even worse than at the gala. His pale hide looked raw, as if it were flaking off. She flushed, narrowing her eyes. Yes, no thanks to you and your grand speech. The ministries have made it abundantly clear that a Zoni like myself is a liability to the war effort and a tantamount to a spy. He hacked sharply, sitting and bowing his head, and she softened a little. Are you all right? There are apparently several ponies in the Ministry of Peace answering that question. I'll be fine for a moment, he said, catching his breath. The scarred buck then leveled his golden eyes at her once more. I sympathize with your predicament, Professor. No pony or Zoni should be discriminated against for their lineage. I have some personal experience in that regard. And more I saw her relax. Well, regardless, the ministries have made it abundantly clear that I'm not trustworthy, she said as she slipped on her saddlebags. So, whatever it is you desire of me, I can assure you the ministries will not approve. Your father is Dr. Propos at the Rome Academy of Sciences and a part of Caesar's cabinet. Your mother is the aunt of a ministry mayor. The suspicions of the ministries are unfortunate, but quite not unreasonable, he said in a soft, raspy voice. It made Silverstripe lean towards him a little. However, I'm not here on behalf of the ministries. I'm here looking to recruit you for an alternative program of my own, and I assure you I could not care less about your lineage. The image shattered, and the shining projection returned. That was my first meeting with Goldenblood. I'm sure you noticed his timing, approaching me right at the end of my last lecture, she said with her arched brow. How he pointed out that his own lineage had been used against him. That was a classic Goldenblood to a T. He got me involved in the Office of Interministry Affairs as a science advisor. You were a Zoni? Scotchtape asked, drawing a slightly annoyed look from the projection. Even after 2 centuries, she muttered, then sighed. Yes, my father was a zebra. My mother was a pony. Hence, Zoni. The only consequence of it should have been the inability to have children, but it was used against me from the start of the war until the burning of Hoofington. I didn't have any loyalties to my father's people, even when Equestria was making it so hard to be a productive member of society, but ponies just saw the stripes. Goldenblood really didn't care, though. I honestly can't remember a single instance of my background being used against me at the OIA. But what did the OIA actually do? Gloria asked with a little frown. I mean, Blackjack said they were supposed to facilitate projects between the ministries? How did you get from that to making Deus? Luna's government was nothing like Celestia's, but few ponies truly appreciated how radical it was. On the surface, the ministries handled most of the functional government, and the rest were covered by Luna herself or the civil service. But the shadows of the OIA, it did what it was supposed to do. Let the ministries work together on projects more easily, but also got things done that couldn't be done in public view. Monster ponies, extensive cybernetics. The public couldn't handle it, so the OIA, ignored by or unknown to the public, was tasked with developing these projects in the shadows of their fruition. She gestured to herself. I was involved with some technical aspects of Project Steel Pony and Project Eternity. And Sanguine. He supervised Project Chimera. Lacuna asked, sounding like she was already knew and just wanted confirmation. I thought it had been destroyed. Yes, and Strottenheimer handled everything to do with Project Starfall and Project Horizons. She rubbed her chin, then waved a glowing hoof. Don't ask me about the specifics of the other projects, though. Goldenblood was very adamant about keeping information contained in each project, and I only know the most basic information about the ones I wasn't working on. So what was Project Steel Pony? I asked. The air above her flashed into a still image of a hospital ward full of ponies with missing limbs. Fluttershy and Redheart were looking over them with aching concern in their eyes. Like Chimera, Steel Pony got started in the Ministry of Peace. Despite the MOP pushing healing magic to its limits, 10 years had disabled thousands of combat and non-combat ponies. The image changed to a mare swinging a silvery foreleg and hoof. Originally, we focused on prosthetics, making them resilient, adaptable, and effective as the missing limb. The image of diamond dogs getting their limbs replaced filled the air. Eventually, most of the research was done in Hoofington. Reconstruction in the battlefront gave us a constant supply of needy test subjects. Then, we had soldiers wounded in battle who returned to the war and found themselves more efficient than before. The overhead image showed steel-legged ponies smashing zebra soldiers in brutal hoof-to-hoof combat. Suddenly, the emphasis of Steel Pony wasn't just replacement, but augmentation. But that pushed things further than Fluttershy or Applejack were comfortable with. It's one thing to want to protect ponies, it's another to turn a pony into a war machine. The image overhead showed Applejack and Fluttershy shaking their heads gravely at a solemn Goldenblood and frustrated-looking Silverstripe. The image disappeared, and Professor Zodiac grinned at us. So we continued it anyway. You what? P21 blurted. How? I mean, it had to take money and materials, and some ponies should have cut on. The professor shrugged. Goldenblood was related to royalty. He never had problems paying for materials. I don't know where the money came from, but he always paid his bills on time. I frowned. Had Goldenblood been fantastically wealthy in addition to a sneaky bastard? Could even a fantastical, wealthy pony's money have covered all the OIA's secret expenses? Zodiac seemed to take our silence as a cue to continue. It was thought that, if we introduced the augmentations gradually, the ministries would accept them. We started with animals before working up to non-pony savants and then ponies themselves. Doof was our first fully augmented battle model, and he exceeded our wildest dreams. Another moving image took shape overhead. This one showing Deus being dropped, literally, from a sky wagon onto an enemy tank. He landed like a multi-ton cat, smashing an indentation in the turret's armor, and proceeding to blow apart the enemy lines. Some of the zebra hoof fighters elicited considerable blows on his armor, but they repaired themselves before my eyes. Heavy weapons tried to blow him apart, but he was either too tough or too fast for them. Eventually, the zebras scattered. I suppressed a shudder. If it hadn't been for all the mutations blowing up his guns, we could never have beaten him. Then he started raping the survivors. Glory snapped her wing in front of Scotch's eyes, in time, I hoped, and immediately after that image scattered. The professor coughed delicately. Sorry about that. We determined we had to leave some parts of him intact for psychological reasons. Other test subjects became less listful and apathetic after conversion. They all just lay there until deactivation. Funny, she said deactivated, like I would have said retired not long ago. So, what happened? Rampage asked. Balefire bombs fell, every pony died. She shook her head with a sigh. Nearly, but not quite. Towards the end, the OIA went too far. Goldenblood did something to piss Luna off, immensely. She removed him and put Horus in charge. But the fact was that most of us were loyal to Goldenblood. That tick Trueblood was the only one who sucked up to Horus. And Goldenblood had made damn sure that all of us were integral to the OIA. Horus wanted to fire all of us, but he wouldn't have had an OIA left. If he'd had a year, he would have cleaned us out and put his own ponies in charge. But as fate would have it, she made a gesture. The next moving image that shimmered into being was a city. A massive city far larger than even Hoofington. Balloons of Pinkie Pie floating in the air as if looking for naughty ponies. It looked like a perfectly calm, blue skies day around noon. Normal, like life was supposed to be. The viewer was standing in a posh cafe far up on a fancy building. I glanced at my friends as they stared at the image of life before the bombs. I was the only one among us, with the possible exception of Lacuna, who'd really seen it before. Well, if you counted memory orbs. Scotch seemed astonished at the sight. P21 looked more pensive. Glory's expression was mixed, but then she'd grown up in a civilized world with a view of the sky. Rampage, well, clearly not all wasteland ponies were interested in old times. She was picking her nose with a hoof. Lacuna appeared coolly indifferent, even a touch scornful. After all, what place would she have in such a world? Me? It looked nice. Then a second later, smaller sun burst to life lower in the city. A rolling green sun with a garish rainbow sheen that clouded the eyes. All around, ponies began talking in worried tones. More murmurs, almost curious rather than worried. A purple field rose up over everything, every window in the room. Directly in front of us was a large pink building. I wonder if the architect had intended it to kind of resemble a horrifying flash of stabbling light, and it was transformed into a black silhouette. From behind it rose a dome of fire, expanding in all directions. It flowed like water between the skyscrapers and along the narrow streets. Moving like a living, hungry thing, it probed and poked and crept around every building till they were all aflame. Some buildings it shoved over entirely. Others, protected from the flash, like this building, and the distant pink towers by flickering magic shields, became consumed in the firestorm like party candles. The artificial sun receded, but the fires spread further and further. The clouds of smoke in the skies stabbed down with thin spikes, and at the top of each spike another green sun was born. No moon rose above the opposite horizon in that artificial twilight. A darkness punctuated by bursts of terrible light and fire. No pony in the cafe screamed, talked, moved. Not till one turned away, then another. Babble, screams, cries, and sobs. Reality, such as it was, reasserting itself. The image flickered away. Professor Zodiac hung her head as she said quietly, I survived the Manhattan MAS hub along with every pony else fortunate enough to be inside the tower when the world ended. She looked a little pained. At first, things were as good as could be expected under the circumstances, but my OIA affiliation and sterility made my place in the Twilight Society rather difficult. I put up with it for a while, but eventually decided to leave and try and find a new home for myself. Fortunately, my augmentations gave me quite an edge. I ended up falling in with a group of others and had roughly the same ideas. And after some time spent wandering what used to be Equestria, my friends and I dared venture into Hoofington.